Hi everyone, I'm here today with Flavia and Kevin, who both wrote Monkey Business, a story of soulmates and primates, and I can vouch that it's a wonderful book because I've read it.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed that one, I couldn't put it down. All right, so tell me, what inspired you to write this book, this novel?
Well, some years ago, going back I think 20 odd years ago, I saw a documentary. I was actually handed a documentary to take home and watch. It was called Hidden Crimes by Suppress, and it was about vivisection and animal experimentation in laboratories. Up to that point, I thought there was no such thing as a shadow or darkness in humanity. It was such an awakening for me. And sadly to say, it was akin to Earthlings, what goes on in laboratories behind closed doors, in the scientific community, supposedly for man's benefit. And every night I'd go to bed and I'd toss and turn and I'd think, while I'm here on the planet, I cannot tolerate this. I need to do something. Sometime later, we watched a documentary called Hidden Crimes, The Origin of AIDS. And it linked insofar as that chimp kidneys were being removed from sedated chimps to make vaccines for humans. Something resonated with me that said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something that we can do that's good for both human, animal, humanity. Because as a vegan, what I do know, that what is good for the human is good for the animal. What is good for the animal is good for the planet. What is good for the planet is good for humanity. That we don't skip a beat. That the same thread of goodness runs all the way through. So having done as much as I could have done, with trying to stop animals going to research. Like initially we stopped with our local pound animals and won through legislation that they no longer went to research. I wasn't prepared to sit on my laurels because animals were still suffering. Now, I've always been drawn to writing, and Kev and I got onto the same page, so to speak, and we co-researched. For 8 years we co-wrote, and we put it together as a romantic suspense. From my perspective, I just wanted to give voice to those sacrificed, supposedly for the good of all, which I question. If it's not good for all, how can it be for the good of all?
How can it be good for anyone?
How can it be good for anyone? And if nothing else, when I close my eyes and I think of the chimps whose kidneys were taken, they could not speak, but I could speak and tell their story as best I could. When I think of the animals in research, I'm not there to defend them, but as best as possible I can tell their story. I can represent them as best as I can. And the book is about evolution of consciousness, which I believe is what we're all here to do on the planet. You know, we speak about children's rights, women's rights, black rights, gay rights, animal rights. And I believe that every time we grant a right, it's a form of evolutionary consciousness that raises our vibration. At the end of the day, what I'd like to say is, we pat ourselves on the back for granting rights. But really, who are we? They were only ever the rights that we stole to begin with.
Exactly.
So we're giving back what we should never have stolen. And so we've done it as a romantic suspense, because not everybody wants to dig into the science or that, because it is information dense.
Yes, it is.
We want to make it so that people that just want a lovely little romance, bit of intrigue, could come along for the ride, put it down and go, oh, I love the end. And then what happened? For anybody who wants to go that little deeper to get the main message of the story, it is, we must come to our hearts or perish. As we know, we're facing a time on the planet where it's so evident with health, with climate change, with what we do to our animal cousins. So if there's not one other thing that we can remember, it's just we must come to our hearts or perish, and that is the evolution of consciousness, because consciousness is that at the heart.
Something that I really enjoyed about the book was the fact that it did have a vegan message in there. It had many messages, but it wasn't blatantly obvious.
No.
So it it's a book for anyone. It's
Well-
not just for a vegan to read. It's not even necessarily for animal lovers. It's for anyone.
No, it's the book that gets you questioning.
It does.
And I think
And it
intelligence
is intriguing.
Intelligence is about questioning. It's not saying, you know, religion's settled, the science is settled, something else is settled. Because when we say something's settled, we're saying we're no longer asking intelligent questions. And intelligent questions are what take us to the next step. So I think we did it very provocatively to get people just to ask questions, if nothing else. Because we are really intelligent. There's no two ways about it. Humans are intelligent. And we are born with our intelligence, but what we will learn is our wisdom, and hence the heart intelligence.
Beautiful. You can tell she's a writer.
Oh,
Did you want to say anything?
Well, I just came in. My perspective was I'd worked in Southern Africa for a decade. I've worked in Africa for a bit over a decade. So background in tropical public health at that stage and family medicine. But I'd worked a fair bit with HIV and AIDS. And when I first saw the Origin of AIDS, which was based on Ed Hooper's book, The Origin of AIDS, my first reaction was, well, this looks like a cover-up. And I was resistant to that. I thought, no, there can't be a cover-up. But then I looked, no, there must be a cover-up. And it looked like medical interventions of some sort had impacted on the epidemic. And indeed, last year, the Journal of Infectious Diseases confirmed that, indeed, HIV has been in part iatrogenic, as in caused by medical interventions. Now, you raise this issue with colleagues at AMA conferences or whatever, and it's like, there's no response. It's like the silence is deafening. And I think there's a subculture in medicine, very similar to the subculture within the Catholic Church, where the institution can do no wrong. And so we tend to scapegoat or sacrifice those at the lower end of the pyramid who don't serve our purposes, or they do serve our purposes, but it's all about profit, it's all about prestige, it's all about power. And so that I think we try to allude to this in the book, that really, I think blacks, I worked in South Africa, as I said, blacks in apartheid South Africa are right at the bottom, just above the animal kingdom. But I think in some ways the South African apartheid situation mirrors back to all of us, our evolving consciousness. And I think in truth, we're not so very different here in this country. So we've seen refugees put behind barbed wire fences, we've seen our rights been taken away from us in the last few years. So medical procedures used to be a matter of informed consent. Now we're saying, well, you know, the end justifies the means. We need to sacrifice some people for the greater good. And we don't want any debate around this. So we're seeing the self-censorship by osmosis. I think we see this within our media. And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of these alternate narratives coming out through Facebook and other forms of media, because the mainstream media is funded by big business.
Yes.
And if you're not going to tell the narrative that supports the dominant societal structures, you'll find yourself without a job. And so we touch on this underbelly within medicine, which is not just medicine, it's all our institutions. So we put the institution first and the child or the human heart or the mother last. And that's what's happening in our culture now. So we need to realise that if we're going to address injustice, it's generic. The animals are victims, children are victims, mothers are victims, a lot of mother blaming going on. And so I think that we try to introduce the fact that we're not just in a pyramidal system, we share this biosphere, and we need to honour the microbes that we live with, the monkeys we live with. So we are embedded in nature, and nature's embedded in us. And we need to have respect for life, however we find it. So I think we try to bring some of those ideas into the book.
Respect.
yeah. And to me, veganism, if I had to sort of phrase it in one way or another, I'd say veganism to me is non-selective compassion. You know, because we're so used to saying, I've got compassion. But compassion for who?
Exactly.
You know, my fellow man, my white man, the rich. We've got to transcend that. It's got to be non-selective, because all belongs. And I think that's one of the messages we bring through the book.
One of the many.
One of the many, yes, it is multi-layered.
Right, so obviously you have vast experiences between the two of you, and you're very articulate,
Thank you.
hence the book. Tell me about your experiences in getting the book off the ground, and was it a challenge?
Look, when you're co-writing, holy Moses, what can I say?
Did you
You've
have to
got to
show
love-
compassion towards each other?
Oh, there were moments of silence. But that was actually quite good because I think, there's a little saying, if we both agree on everything, then one of us is not necessary.
Oh, okay.
So when you're writing a book, that really comes out very, very strongly, don't you think?
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, I come from a space which is very pro-technology,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had to rethink what we were doing. So I've had a few incidents along the way that have shaken me, and I've had to really question, I suppose, my core beliefs, especially around medicine. So I think I had medicine up on a pedestal, and I think doctors do a lot of good. However, the paradigm is overly technological. It doesn't acknowledge the subjective. It ignores emotion. It denies spirituality. And this is where I think we fall down. So I think we need, but it's societal. I mean, in the same way that the organisations, including the church in South Africa, reflected the apartheid culture, I think medicine, the law, banking, you name it, they all reflect the sort of values that we hold dear, perhaps unconsciously dear. But I think it's all about really coming back to acknowledging the sacredness of our being, of our spirit, and
also too, we had different styles of writing. I'm very flowery, as we're told by our manuscript analyst.
I'm a bit technical.
And so he pulled us in. He says,
Good
Flavia,
compliment there.
says, Flav, you're just too flowery. And Kev, you've got to stop trying to turn textbooks into a novel. So I got a bit of a wicked sense of humour. I went back and I just simplified it and made it a little bit less romantic, but still very romantic, mind you. I walked in, I was just having that moment, I popped our work on the table and I said, you should be very proud of me now, I've deflowered all our characters. But yeah, it's learning to actually be in rhythm with each other. So what we did, which worked...
A bit like a dance almost.
Yeah.
Well,
We started-
I think you partnered very, very well.
Well, we ended up writing over each other's work. So it sort of blends a bit and without taking from who we are.
Good.
But it was challenging. I won't pretend it wasn't, but good in a way that I think challenges, they expand you.
Some of the
Yes, you
ideas
grow.
are a bit challenging, and I think whether it's challenging the medical paradigm or challenging vivisection, which we do, some of it's just too much to read in terms of technical stuff. Andrew Knight's book was very informative. It really does justice to that whole issue in terms of an academic text. But in terms of bringing this into a gentler conversation, we try to sort of, blend the technical with the humorous, with the, so we've just...
But you've also got the references at the back of the book for anyone that wants to read further and get more technical and...
For the curious.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of research, peer-reviewed research around our evolving sense of consciousness. So although clairvoyance is looked upon as being wacky and out there within the medical profession now, I think we're using magnets across brains at the moment. We still haven't, and last year, of course, Einstein's gravitational theories were empirically proven. So we are, not only are we embedded in nature, we're also embedded in both the physical and an energetic or spiritual world in a sense. And in the 1920s, people referring to time-space, but we've lost that sense of, that time is something we've constructed. And so we try to weave in our sense of what is consciousness and what is time. And we allude to some of that in our stories. So it's trying to weave in that in a way which is opening people up to some technical stuff, and the references are there in the back, but in the way of everyday living. So often around death, in my experience, there are an unusual phenomenon that challenge our sense of consciousness being purely emergent from the brain, that consciousness is pre-birth and post-death. And so harking back to some of the theories of Carl Jasper's, a famous fundamental psychiatrist from Germany. But I mean, I think these ideas have been lost in the 20th century. So I think there's a real need to really come to grips with, well, who are we? Who are we?
It's deep.
And what are we doing here? And
It's
how
very
do you make that a little bit more accessible in a romantic suspense?
And of course, the vegan message is, because we've also done Gestalt, studied in Gestalt, and it goes beyond the I-it, and it's the I-thou. So the only way we can hurt an animal or hurt another human is if I'm the I and you're the it. But if I'm the I and you're the thou, and it's a soul connection, and they say the eyes are the windows to the soul.
Yes.
Which is why we freak out when we see these graphic images of animals being hurt
And some of them are
in
crying.
video, because we're seeing the eyes. Some part of us recognises there's a soul there.
Yes.
It's not an it. And people go, don't show me. But I
You see
question
their
if what they're
feelings,
really
their emotions.
shunning away from is the fact that I'm showing the thou, or we're speaking to the thou. When we get to a point of I thou, then and only then do I believe we're going to have non-violence. And so we justify so much through the it. And I make a point, in fact, we've got our little cat in the book, Mellow, who was a dear little love of ours. And everywhere through, she was a she. We never referred to that cat as an it. We have another animal in the book, Lucy, which is our lab chimp. And we made a point of Lucy was a she. She was not an it. She was not a number. So we need to, part of our conscious evolution is the I thou.
I love that.
And relationships are where we heal, and whether it be a medical practice or a commercial transaction, dare I say, that if there's heart involved, if there's relationship, then there's respect and there's mutual dignity. Whereas once we start to objectify each other as just a patient, or just a number, or just a
medical
client,
number.
then whether it's within medicine or banking or the law, you become an it. And I think that we've lost our sense of community. We used to be a commonwealth in this country. We've lost that from our lexicon, I think, in the last few years. So we need to really restore that sense of relationship, of community in our families, in our communities, in our nation, and internationally. So it's just, we're losing this. We're losing the heart, and we're becoming almost automatons, and the human is being displaced by machines, and we're losing something very precious. So our hearts are precious, our spirits are precious, and as we've done to the animals,
we're doing
to ourselves.
And that's something that's haunted me for a long time. After seeing what happens to these animals in laboratories, I thought, because we're turning a blind eye to it, or perhaps we just don't know, and we're not saying this is not right, then it floods through the human race until we're doing it to each other. We've got to say non-violence everywhere. And one thing I feel very strongly about, which I'm hoping has come through in the book, is that when we don't go to the aid of someone being victimised, and in this case the animals, the blacks, and we say it's not my business, and it becomes our turn, who's going to be there for us? We need to stand as a collective.
So the banality of evil we were seeing in the Nazi era applies very much to our own era. It's always banal, It's something very ordinary. But I think it's really connecting relationally at a heart level and doing unto others,
We've become complacent, haven't we?
Very much so, I think so.
Yeah. And it's got a lot to do with it.
I would like to challenge anybody on social media from this moment on forward. Just try and take a deep breath, because the person you are connecting with is not an it with its comment. Try and remember there is a person on the other end. You may not like what they have to say. You may be in disagreement. Try and remember the thou.
Yes.
Because, we've lost our community in terms of, once upon a time, therapy was team sympathy. I could knock on your door, or vice versa. We could drop everything. We could sit down. We could chat it all out. We could run into each other at a cafe.
Your neighbour could be your best counsellor.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have that. So
we
now,
barely know our neighbours these days.
So now we've supplanted friendship for friends.
Yes.
And these are on social media. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because I've made some beautiful friends through this system. But remember, there is a person on the other end. You don't know whether they've just stopped crying over something. You don't know whether they've just had an argument. You don't know whether they've had too much to drink. You don't know whether what they're expressing is because they truly, truly believe it from a heart space. Let's try some respect.
And it's not just about what that person is expressing, it's about how another person is receiving it.
Yes. And I think we see it's almost the zen of this sort of poor behaviour but lack of feeling in Trump's tweets. So the leader of the free world, the patriarch, of our Anglo-American culture, has instrumentalised himself so much that I don't feel that he feels for other people. But once again, he's a reflection of our collective consciousness.
I'd like you to have an interview with him.
He's a gift to us if we can see him as being a mirror to ourselves, because I think he does reflect back to us. He didn't get there out of nowhere.
True.
And I think there's a whole construct around his election that I think we need to say, well, is this who represents us, and what are we missing here? And because I think he's not all bad, he's not all good, but he reflects back to us who we are. And I think that the callousness of that sort of leadership, that patriarchal leadership, which has evolved over thousands of years, is showing just how shallow and how empty that construct is. And I think the feminine is coming in, and I think we try to demonstrate that in our book as well, with Estelle's evolution as a young lady maturing into womanhood, waking up to patriarchy, waking up to the corruption. So it's a spiritual awakening, a political awakening to say, look, what's going on here?
Don't give too much away.
No.
So tell me, how long did it take you to write this book?
8 years of co-research and co-writing.
8 years.
Kev loves research. I've got to say this.
Look, I think we're also. Can I say that I've had a change of heart myself. So I think we both, well, maybe I'm perhaps me more than you, but we both had a change of heart over that period of time. So I think we were evolving as the book was evolving, and I was waking up as the book was going on. I think, no, this can't be right. This can't be right. Oh my God, it is right.
Because every time more research had come in, we'd be going, look at this. No.
Yeah.
And I'd say to Kev, look, we need to get to the next paragraph. We need some research, because, you've got to know the rules to break the rules.
Yes.
Yeah, you've got to know what the research is currently saying. And we know research changes over time. So we can't peg everything on the research at the moment. Science is evolving. We mustn't lose track of that. So Kev would come in and go, okay, I've got this much research for the next paragraph. I'm like, we're not writing the Encyclopedia Britannica.
You've obviously done so much research.
We're getting hooked in. And, whereas I started with my heart for the animals, by the time I finished, I thought, we are doing to the most vulnerable humans what we are doing to the animals. I was floored. I felt, how? I think to this day I'm still saying how. Why?
It comes back to the it and the thou.
The it and the thou.
Well, in the African, I remember Flavia showing me my children are Afro-Aussies, and I could never get it. I could never get why zoos were such a bad thing, because I loved the zoo as a kid,
So did I.
But then, I saw a photo from the Congo, actually from Antwerp, in 1950s. A little 4-year-old child who would have been about my age in 1958, in a human zoo in Antwerp, and realising that in human zoo they were common in the 50s in Europe.
Wow.
And it shocked me. I thought, what? Because I think that as long as we see the other as the it, so it's the refugee behind the barbed wire as an it, or the animal in the zoo as an it, as long as we're in that I, it, there's no relationship.
Yes.
And we don't feel with that other person, that other being, that other sentient being. And I think there's a real need for us, as we are smart, we're intelligent, but we lack wisdom. And that wisdom is not a head thing, it's a heart thing.
Mm-hmm.
So until we really embrace our need to connect to our hearts,
Well,
I think we're
experience,
doomed.
isn't it?
I think we're doomed as a species. We have the number of the extinction we're going through. Is it the 6th extinction? But we're going through an era of extinction with the Anthropocene era, and our behaviour and the unintended consequences, or careless or reckless or indifferent, the indifference that we have towards our impact on other living beings is horrendous.
Can you tell me very briefly more about the human zoos? Pardon me.
Can I throw something in
Sure.
there? Because it's the image I showed Kev, as Kev says, was a young dark girl, and the white Western people,
Middle class Antwerpian citizens, like ourselves.
coming to visit the girl and handing her bananas. Now, we use the same justifications then as we do now, but she's well dressed and she's being fed and she looks cared for.
Mm-hmm.
But she's
Very
an it.
interesting.
She's an it. And that's how we justify so much of our behaviour. Oh, but the animals looked after and fed
Yes.
and sheltered. But while that animal is an it, there is no respect. And then we're not seeing beyond our behaviour. So we need to remove ourselves from the justification, as with slaves. But their masters look after them and they're being fed, and where else would they go? And now we're hearing it about the purpose-bred animals, the farmed animal, factory farming. Yes, but they're being fed and they would go extinct, and they're looked after and the farmers love them.
And they're bred for us to eat.
But they're in it.
The same rationalisations.
So
Exactly.
for as long as we use it, we will never break our behaviour.
I had this debate. I tried to have this debate with somebody who'd had too much to drink.
That's always a good place to
last
start.
night, and saying that the animals were put on the planet for us to eat. It's like, I don't know how to respond sometimes. It's just beyond me, But it comes back to that it and the thou.
It's not I thou.
I think we are omnivores. I think most of us are omnivores. We plant or animal. However, we do have choices.
We do, and that it's not necessary for
Yes,
survival.
it's not necessary.
Anyway, we're getting off topic. We were talking about a book.
Yeah, no, that's all right. It's all interconnected.
All right. So, what advice would you have for somebody that wanted to write a book? What can you help them with?
I feel, I'll address that in two sections. First of all, because I do a lot of public speaking, and what I say to people is, if something does not sit right with you in society, or disturbs you, or makes you question, or you are drawn to a situation in terms of how you react emotionally, don't sit there with it, because this is, if you like, a signpost of your destiny. The link to that is we're all born with the right gifts to address that situation. So in our case, or in my case, our case, was we felt strongly about the subject.
You were passionate about it.
Passionate.
Yes.
And so, but the gift was that we're in some, I don't know whether we're the best writers or good writers or whatever, but we have an ability to write. It corresponded with
and
that.
it developed over time. I think that I think we.
Well, 8 years.
Yeah. Well,
Oh yes.
well, I think, like I said, it was a dance. I mean, I'm learning to. I think Flavia's got a better wit. I'm more technical and dot the I's, cross the T's. But I think that I think your passion has got to drive it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because
definitely.
if you're going to, it's always going to be a long and in some ways lonely journey. We had each other, but that had its own challenges.
Of course.
But you really need to have the passion to get to write, to tell your story, to tell a narrative.
And on top of that, I'm saying don't judge yourself as whether you're going to be a good writer or not a good writer. Write authentically.
Yeah, with
'Cause
your heart.
If you're writing authentically, it doesn't matter your standard. The reader will pick up on the authenticity, and it'll be again I thou. This is much an I thou, or it should be a journey of I thou. as anything else we do with our lives. So I'd say if you feel inspired to write, if you love words, if you love connecting words together and telling a story, do it. Don't second guess. You might do it in 3 months, you might do it in 8 years.
What if you feel like you're really not good with putting words together, but you really have this passionate drive about something?
Go for it.
Yeah. Can I own up to something? I was in the bottom class of English,
No
maths, and
way.
everything. In school. I was in the bottom class of everything. Everything.
So did you write the book on your own? Tell the truth.
And this will go back into the
I don't think
spirituality.
it could not have been completed. I mean, I think Flavia was often the driving force behind it, and I sometimes had to be dragged in, should I say? Not dragged in, but no, I had a passion to follow this story, but I think it started to develop a life of its own, and I'm not sure how that happens, but our characters started to draw us in, and it didn't go the way we thought it would, but it did, but it didn't, but it just ended up growing. It developed a life of its own in a way.
Yeah.
And also too, because I believe we have two types of thoughts. We have incoming thoughts and outgoing thoughts. So we're so busy with our outgoing thoughts. I'm going to have to pay the electricity bill. I'm going to did I turn the oven on? Did I leave the iron on? You know, who's coming, who's going, what's happening, what's my routine like? We're pumping out these outgoing thoughts all day long. Now, inspiration means in spirit. It's something that comes from another place. And if we quieten our minds long enough from the outgoing thoughts, be it meditation or whatever practice we use, we will get, those words will just flow. We're going to be connected to that moment. So what I used to do, and I love my spa, I don't have one now, I'm getting another. But when I needed to come up with the next paragraph,
Keep going.
I'd sit in the spa and just in the bubbles, let my mind wander, and then the paragraph would come to me. I'd dry myself down very, very quickly, get to that computer and write. Because for that time I've switched off my outgoing thoughts. And sometimes another trick I'd do is, before going to bed of a night, I'd say, I want to express this in the next paragraph. And I'd fall asleep. Again, I'm not in outgoing mode. In the middle of the night, I'd be going, I've got those sentences, and I'd jump up and write.
Good.
So inspire, allow the inspiration, because I believe our best works come from another source. Now, we can call that God, we can call that creative spirit, we can call that our higher selves, we can call it many, many different things. But it comes from out the higher part of who we are, whatever we choose to believe that is.
What were you talking about before with children and
not blocking their intuition? Look, I think when we block children's intuition, we do them a great disservice. I'll come back to something of my own here, and that is, as I said, in school I was in the lower classes for everything. I succeeded in being in the lower classes. But that wasn't the point. The point was, there are left-brained people, there are right-brained people. And your schooling system is designed for the left-brained people. As long as we can read and remember and recite and give the right responses, we will do all right. Now, a right-brained person will work very differently. They can't just read, memorise and write those answers. They'll feel continuously inspired. Maybe they're the daydreamers.
creative?
The creative. They're your artists. They're your writers. They're your intuits.
But I think it's also natural facility in the sense that the right brain stuff is very much in the flow.
In the flow, yeah.
So we call that the default network, which is a very flowing network, whereas the task-orientated network, which is what our society rewards, is more left-brained. So I think our culture is, if you like, a bit lopsided. It doesn't value the creative. It doesn't value the flowing, the playful. It wants production, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And I think that we suffer as individuals, as families, as societies, where we become too task-orientated. So if we just play with it, flow with it,
and so, yeah.
it nurtures, it's more nurturing.
So when a child comes up and talks about imaginary friends, foster that. Let that happen, let that develop, let that creativity develop. And then on a more serious note, and I feel it's really imperative we speak about this, even though it's not necessarily a nice thing to speak about, but if it saves a life, I need to speak about this. I was listening to somebody in, I think, homicide on Oprah being interviewed some years ago. And he made a point of saying the reason so many people are murdered or come into problems with crime is because we have stopped listening to our intuition. An animal in the wild, if it senses danger, it doesn't stand there and go, well, look, I'm being silly, I need to relax, I'll just take a deeper breath, I'm going to show how macho I am, I'm going to stand here, and here comes the lion, and I'm gone.
Mm.
Humans, on the other hand, they'll go, something doesn't feel right, or I shouldn't go out tonight, or I'm better off walking on that side of the street, or I feel the energy of somebody in a train carriage or whatever doesn't sit right with me. Listen, because I'd rather sound silly now and think that somebody has not come a cropper than for me not to deliver that message.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm saying never break a child's intuition. We're not accidentally given intuition for no good reason. We're given left and right brain. We're given the logical and we're given the intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
And when I speak to people in a crowd, when I address a room, I usually make a point, I'd run this little exercise and I say, if I can get everybody to close their eyes, now I want to take you through an exercise. I want you to imagine a world where there's no creativity. Imagine that world. I want you to imagine a world where there's no perception. We're trying to imagine it.
Very difficult.
I want you to imagine a world without emotion. And I take away the emotion, the creativity, the perception, the abstract. In other words, I remove the abstract world
Mm-hmm.
as they're closing their eyes. And I bring them back and I go, what does your world look like? And the response is, there is no world. Because it took creativity, it took perception, it took something beyond to make a building even, to make a common eye on a table. It had to come from an abstract to become a material object. So we must learn to honour that in ourselves, the material and the non-material. And again, the I-thou. It comes back to the I-thou. When I see the animal as beyond material, beyond its fur, beyond its taste, what it might taste like to me, beyond what it would look like for me to be adorn myself with some part of it, then I'm seeing something beyond the physical. I'm seeing beyond the material.
You're seeing their eyes.
We're seeing the soul. So we must honour our souls. We
Yeah.
must honour our non-material.
Okay, so that reminds me of the other offer that you have with my vegan vouchers. So can you tell us about that one?
Okay, yep. I do clairvoyance.
Tell
I've
us
been
more
doing
about
it,
that.
doing it for, some decades now. Do I give away my age?
No need for that. You're a woman.
Okay. It's nice to be 26. No. So what I do is I do tarot readings, clairvoyance, psychometry.
Can I just butt in there?
Yeah.
Do you remember that I came and saw you?
I do indeed.
And I do have to admit that I didn't like what you told me because it's not what I wanted to hear. I was grateful, but disappointed in what I actually heard. And then some months later, turned out to be 100% true. Just like, wow,
That's a bugger.
you're good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, this has been what I've been doing for a long time, and I'm offering it through my vegan vouchers. I might want to add that my style of work, I'm hoping, is gentle. We all have different.
Wonderful.
I think we all have different ways of delivering a message, but I'm also aspire to not take power from the person saying this is going to happen.
Right.
So, for instance, if I know you're about to drive over a cliff,
Oh,
figuratively speaking, I'd rather say put on your brakes
right.
than saying, whoops, this is where you're going. Because I believe forewarned is forearmed. I believe we have choices. And I believe clairvoyance is just an aerial view of the road we're travelling on, where it's going to take us.
That's interesting, an aerial view.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it put that way before.
Yeah, and again, I think we've all got it. But yeah, this is what I offer through my vegan vouchers at obviously a reduced price.
Well, members can have a look
can
at that.
contact me.
I'm
you come in
sure
and
there's
see
lots
me.
of people listening that would like to now read your book
Oh.
and probably contact you for a reading as well, because
Sure.
I can vouch for how
Mhm.
good that is. Well, both the book and
Yeah,
your readings.
thank you.
So, Flavia, tell me how it came to be that you developed the skill of being able to give psychic readings, or is that something that you're born with, or?
It is something I was born with, but I think we're all born with it to some degree. And going through school, I just couldn't understand why everybody couldn't see the things I was seeing as a child, or couldn't relate to me, because I took it for granted everybody could and everybody knew, and so I was kind of a little bit ostracised. However, when I came to about 17, 18, I realised there was a name for it, and I realised that it could be put to practical use, so to speak.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, things can be used very practically. Anything. It's a dance between the seen and the unseen.
And you were talking before about children's intuition. How does that relate to your psychic ability? Like,
how does that relate? Is in terms of that, I believe we're all born with intuition.
yes, and you were talking earlier about
Not repressing it.
Yes, not repressing
I
the child's intuition and allowing them to have that
To
and
develop.
talk about that and
Yeah.
develop that.
I think, any gift a child has or any ability a child has should always be fostered.
Good.
It's not for us to decide what we want them to have and what we don't want them to have. We can't.
It is a
I
common
don't think
mistake,
we
though,
should be
isn't it?
editing our children, because to be born with an ability and then to have it taken away because we have a prejudice against us does not serve the child, and it doesn't serve our humanity either, and it doesn't keep the child safer in later in life, and it doesn't allow the child to have spiritual boundaries in terms of, I don't feel safe around this person. I've got a case of someone who said to their mother as a child, was screaming, I don't want to go in that car, I do not want to go in that car. The father brought the car home, screaming. Within weeks, that child died in that car.
Oh my gosh.
I know it sounds terrible, but this is what I'm saying. This is not just a matter of child playing with some imaginary friend. This can have very deep implications that the child just knows something that the adult has lost touch with. Or a child saying, I don't feel right around this uncle or auntie, or in this home, or this place scares me, or I don't want to go there. We've got to sort of stand back from ourselves and say, why? It's not necessarily just a case of a naughty child.
Yeah.
And when we start boxing people as children, then we rob them for something downstream throughout life. And so whether it's a child or an adult, I don't think it's our place to edit that individual. I think it's our place to honour that individual and foster that individual. And children are very open when they're young because they don't know the prejudice.
They're honest.
They're honest.
They're innocent.
They're
and
innocent.
honest.
They're honest. And they're as innocent about their intuition as they are about their intuition around animals. The only way, I'm sorry, I'm going off track to come back to something that's, again, marries in a very, maybe not such an unusual way, and that is the only way we can get a child to eat animals is through deception. That is how pure their spirits are. That is just how knowing they are.
Yeah.
So it's time to honour the child.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much
Thank you
for
very
today.
much. Yes,
Oh, thank you.
It's
Thank
lovely
you.
being
It
here.
was
Lovely
good.
listening to
Fun.
you. I've learnt quite a lot. Some more that I didn't learn in the book.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, we wandered off the book, did we?
Oh no, that's okay. That was good.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. It was a
for
pleasure.
coming.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming down and spending so much time with us. It's been great. Thank you.
That's good. Actually, up. I came up.
I came
up,
up.
sorry. Up.
You're up in the
Up,
world.
of
I'm
course.
down. Yeah. So, well, one last plug. This is the book. Actually, maybe it would be best if you can show the book. Monkey Business. Oops. A Story of Soulmates and Primates by Flavia, Ursino and Kevin Coleman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And just for anybody who's picking it up, all I want to say is enjoy.
I
For
did.
whatever you get out of it, just enjoy it. That's
Yeah.
why we've written it.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.